now while we move into the red paper item.
Chair, can somebody check that all the list of people down on the participation panel are actually all councillors and officers?
Yeah.
Everybody who we've still got Alan Francis and Rebecca.
I'm in the process of quitting.
But my understanding is they are part of the users group, so they should be okay. Is that right, Adele?
That's fine. Yes, they've had access to the
Fine,
red
so they've had
papers
access to
as
the
part of
papers and
technical
they're covered by that. So I think we're happy that everybody who's on the row on the bottom of my screen is access to that. And I have had confirmation that we are not running live at present. Ros.
Can I just confirm that everybody present is sure they cannot be overheard in their remote location, and to let the chair know if there are any issues? Thank you.
Anybody being overheard? No. Right, who has comments on the red papers? If I could see hands up, please. Tell you what, while people are putting hands up, I will put forward a few comments. On page 12 of the red papers is the results of a simulation. Alan's fine to be on the call, so so he's covered by code of conduct. So on that, that's a simulation result. So looking into there now, that looks at, it says long term 100. First of all, it says current 20%. What does current mean? I.e., when was current? Because that was a date, I'm assuming, not is what it was the day that went to print. So when was current, and what does that mean? End of 20, I'm assuming that was 60% of a pre-COVID issue. Could you just explain that table a bit to me?
Of course. So this was when we first went out to do the modelling. We were in the midst of the first lockdown, and at the time patronage level was about 20% of what it had previously been before COVID. So current for them was current at the time that we first went out for the modelling. So it would have been around June, July time, I think. And then end of 2020, we anticipated, all being well, that we would get to about 60% of previous patronage. We're actually at the moment only on about 45%. And then long term is obviously 100% of previous pre-COVID patronage. The industry expectation is that the recovery will actually only ever achieve about 85%, and anything over that will really be new ridership. But we wanted to look at the pre-COVID numbers to have an idea of what sort of patronage we could be looking at needing to manage.
So that moves neatly on to my second question. Sure. What is the, and obviously it's Milton Keynes Council that has the intelligence on ridership figures, and that is going to be pretty crucial to anybody who is tendering for this project. So we're the ones who have that record of data. How much information? So for instance, we say, well, we think it's going to, this is what we had last year, and we think it's going to recover to about 85%. That is automatically giving those organisations a issue to say you provide us with false information if it actually recovers to 100% of figures, and they've banked on 85% because that's what we have said. What are we advising people that we think the tender is going to be?
For the tenderers, we are providing them with the last 12 months worth of data and letting them make their decisions about what they think the ridership will be. We'll be able to show them what the ridership has been very recently, but we'll also be able to show them what it was, and it will be up to them to make those judgments. We won't be dictating you need to deliver based on 60%. We're saying you need to be flexible about your delivery. You need to accept that this will change and will increase, and we'll be basically giving them the last 12 months.
By 12 months, is that 12 months from when you go out to tender, or is that 12 months pre-COVID? Because we're about 9 months or 8 months into a bit of a lockdown situation, which is not going to give anybody a very fair crack of the whip as to understanding the long-term aims. So what?
We're going out to tender at the very beginning of December, and so it will give them several months prior to COVID. But I mean, we can extend that period. That's not when we could give them 18 months if that's felt to be more appropriate. That's not a problem at all.
What level of ticket prices are we looking at for? I have to say, I've read through the paperwork at some length and I've seen numerous different figures quoted. So what, I mean, it certainly says on page 10, a £4 fare cap, £3 per standard rider. What is the level of fees that we are, or are we going to let people set their own fees? What are we putting forward in the tender?
We will be controlling the fares. Fares on April 1st will be £2.50 for non-peak, £3.50 for peak, and obviously accepting concessions. And the £4 was just sort of a, don't expect it to go up beyond that at any point in the contract length or contract life, but it gives us a little bit of flexibility over the 5-year period because bus prices do go up over time. I just wanted to give us a little bit of flexibility around that. I've rephrased that subsequently because I realise it's not actually very clear in the way the paperwork's written. In terms of the modelling, we looked at a number of price points because we wanted to find the right balance between making sure that the tenderer could put forward something that they could feel confident would work for them, and also keeping the prices as cost effective as possible for our users.
Thank you. So I have to say, I think one of the things I've seen in this is I think you're probably being a little bit pessimistic in your ridership figures. I do understand that people who use buses may well not use it. However, there is a significant, as regards to public transport, there's significant usage of private hire vehicles in Milton Keynes, was pre-COVID, and I'm sure there will be again. And these are people who are using journeys in Milton Keynes. So these people are driving across the city. I have to say, if you certainly look at my ward, why is anybody going to pay a private hire driver £12 or £14 to take them from Oney or Lavendon to Bletchley when they can get it for £4 from this? That leads me to believe that when this operates between 6 AM and 11 PM, half an hour standard approach, I think you will potentially find within a period of a few months when people realise they don't have to pay private hire prices, that you will find a significant increase of demand very quickly for this service. What's your comments on that? And if so, how is that going to be portrayed too? Now, that might be a good thing. I'm not saying it's not a good thing. If you look at some of what else fits into Lauren's profile of wanting to, look at climate change and all of the things that go on with that, this is a good thing if people are using a shared ride rather than a direct car to take them from one place to the other. But if that is going to, number one, have a real negative on the private hire industry, which is, to be fair, in real difficulty already, we need to be aware of that. And we also need to be aware that it may well put extra demand into this system that we also need to be aware of. Have you got any views on that?
Yes, I mean, I don't have a complete answer to that. We are taking some measures. So we won't go door to door with the exception of certain disability requirements. And we won't do pre-booking. And we have been asked about pre-booking a lot. I know it's something people want, but we've resisted it on the grounds that it is one of the things that private hire offers that we will not. Obviously, some people won't want to share a journey. They won't want to be diverted even for an extra 2 minutes to pick up another person and to go a slightly different route. So there will be a balance to be found there. I'm sure that some people will decide that the cheaper journey is worth the slightly less convenient journey. So there is an open question about what ridership will actually be to some extent. The dynamic purchasing system and the tender are being set up so that you can apply under private hire vehicle licensing as long as it's Milton Keynes that's licensed you, as well as public service vehicles. So the taxi companies can actually go for this tender if they think they can deliver on it. And I have sent a question to legal just to clarify that we are doing enough to separate ourselves from the private hire companies.
Thank you. That helps. I think the issue is not necessarily, although we've got to be very careful about making sure we don't damage private hire industry. We've also got to make sure that the potential demand that could come from that industry into this service, if it is as good as the paperwork that we see states it could be, I think we have to understand how that extra demand, I think hopefully you could make it clear to anybody who is tendering of the potential increase that could come well above the 85%, the 100%, or whatever other figure we've got there. And that concerns me slightly in the way that if we reach the top of capacity, just what could happen to that. I spoke earlier about the fact that, you know, this is all that many people are going to have as their method of public transport unless it comes to private hire vehicles. This is going to be it for them. There's not going to be a sort of second string, and with the fact that they're not going to run concurrently for a period of time to allow one to speed up and one to slow down, that concerns me slightly as well. If how does it work with somebody? So I am booking in for, I've got a hospital appointment. I need to be at the hospital for 10 o'clock because that's my appointment, and I need to get to the hospital for 10 o'clock. In theory, it takes 20 minutes on the road from where I am, but I don't know whether I'm sharing a lift with anybody else. So I might be going via 2 or 3 other places that I don't really know much about. And I could be 15 minutes, I could be half an hour before I'm picked up, and I'm not allowed to pre-book it a day in advance to make sure that it is working. How am I going to work on that? I have to say, I know that this is not necessarily all coming out of the red papers, but this is going to be rebroadcast shortly afterwards, so people should be able to pick up on that. So how's that going to work?
So yeah, you would have to allow a certain amount of time for that pickup period. We will be, as part of the contract management, controlling the amount of time that can be added to a journey for additional pickups. So if it's a 20-minute journey, they can't add 10 minutes to it, picking up half a dozen other people. You know, 2 or 3 minutes, fine. So you will need to allow that in. But I mean, for some people, they may go, well, actually, I therefore want to book a cab because I have the certainty and I don't have to turn up 20 minutes early. For other people, actually, the bus used to get me there an hour before my appointment anyway. So getting there 20 minutes early is great. It's much, much less. So there is a balance and a personal judgment to be made around that. What we will do is work with the operators to set sensible parameters and make sure those are available to people so they can understand what they need to take into account when they make those journeys. I do absolutely take the point about the uncertainty around patronage, and I will take that away and see what else we can do in the tender to make sure that that is addressed.
Thank you very much. I've got Martin and John with hands up. Martin, if you'd like to go first.
A much less demanding question than you've been making, Chair. I'm referring to the 2 maps of Milton Keynes on page 9 of the pink pages. In one of them, it says there's a map of Milton Keynes with a nice shading, presumably indicating the area served, and there are 1 or 2 blank areas which seem to represent things like Caldecott Lake and Woolen Lake. Now, you certainly wouldn't expect DRT to take you to the middle of Woolen Lake, so I understand that. But on the next, and adjacent to it, there's another plan, a map which says DRT vehicles restricted to main roads. And there are similar rather blank areas in large parts of my ward, in Great Limford and Stantonbury, and also at my parish council meeting, the parish councillor for Wolstone expressed some concerns about how it was going to work in his area, and there does seem to be a blank area in Wolstone as well. So what's the precise significance of the second rather more concerning map?
The heat maps would...
Oh, sorry, could I just pick up on one point, Martin? That's a map of a part of Milton Keynes. The significant part of the rural area is not included in that map. It's a map of part of Milton Keynes.
So it covers most of the urban area of Milton Keynes, and the purpose of the heat maps was just to demonstrate a point that they were making around if you restrict vehicles to, and again, this is modelling, this was us exploring whether or not this could work. So this is, the modelling doesn't demonstrate a final solution. But what it was showing was just that if you allow vehicles to go anywhere, this is what, the heat map looks like. This is everywhere they can go. The only places they can't go are literally into the middle of lakes and parks. If you restrict them just to main roads, those little green areas are the bits that they can't get to. In discussion with the company that did the modelling, we were talking about the fact we wouldn't necessarily want to make those restrictions in terms of driving, because it may be that sticking to, that there's a road that's a much more suitable way through to pick somebody up, that takes them off the main roads for a few moments, and that should be okay. We shouldn't necessarily close those roads off to them. But there would be obviously a more detailed discussion required around exactly what we're defining as the suitable roads for them to be using for pick up and drop off. But it was just indicative to show that actually, even if you don't let them go off the main roads, most of where they're not going is still lakes and parks.
Martin, any comments? I think that's answered, but
it covers the point. And I was using Milton Keynes as shorthand for the new city. Sorry.
Yes, there are other areas as well, as I'm sure you're aware. John.
Thank you. I would just come back on Adele's point about you wouldn't expect somebody to add 10 minutes of diversion to a 20-minute journey. It seems to me that a 20-minute journey will get you most places in the urban area, Chair, with respect to your rural sensitivities. And during that time, we expect the vehicle to have at least 4.3 people on average. And if we get at the ramp up, we expect 6.6 people at a time in it, all also doing 20-minute journeys. And therefore, in every 20-minute time, I think the 5 people that got into the vehicle before me should expect to get out, and the 5 people that then also need to go in there to keep the occupancy up. So it seems to me that actually we do expect stops, probably of about a stop every 2 minutes. Otherwise, you can't achieve between 4 and 6 average people in the vehicle at any one time. So I am just concerned if we've got our, if we were thinking of putting in our specification that you can't have that number of stops in journeys of that length, I think we kind of have a bit of a problem. Hopefully officers can take that away and kind of consider it, because I think that's important. The other thing I wanted to turn to was the subsidy required in the bottom but one row of the table on page 12, which seems to suggest that even if we get a ramp up of 5 times, the final column is 5 times the occupancy of the middle column on that page. I'm trying not to put out numbers in the hope that nobody's going to bleep me. That the thing appears to be still loss making. Now, it seems to me that if we have a system that makes a loss and requires a subsidy for the first few 100,000 people, by the time you've got 5 times as many people in, I kind of hope that this would be self-generating, all those extra people piggybacking on a system that's already running there, simply occupying more seats of most of those vehicles, at least some of the time. Have we deliberately designed this to prevent it being profitable and self-generating, or is this a consequence we agree on from our desire to keep the tariffs where we set them?
This is
built on the tax.
Feel free to answer, but I think if you ever get to that level of ridership, there'll be bus routes, commercial bus routes re-implemented, and these small vehicles will disappear.
But Chair, the reason why I think this is important is because we've already said this is the best hope of a generation of getting motorists out of their car And if we're designing this that we can only get motorists out of their car if subsidised by the taxpayer, we've got a vicious circle there, because we then are catch-22, because if we get them out of our car, then they won't be getting the parking income, and the whole thing just goes round and round and doesn't work. So surely we have to get to a situation where huge increases in passengers actually enable somebody to make some money out of this.
Adele.
Yeah, so there were a number of things we did in the modelling, and one of them was putting different price points in for tickets on the same. Everything else is the same. If we change the ticket price, what happens? Another was everything else is the same. If we change the number of concessionary users, what happens? It is possible to have a profitable commercial scheme. There is one in New York, which is now, it's taken a little while, but it's now fully commercial and is actually profitable marginally. But you can't do that and offer free travel to concessionary card holders and offer very reduced travel to young people. You can't have a commercially viable scheme and keep it as close as possible. We haven't even been able to keep it completely at bus prices, but as close as possible to bus ticket prices. So the figures in the modelling are indicative of a particular scenario and a particular price point and a particular percentage of concessionary holders. And we changed some of those and we moved it around to try and find something that we felt was a reasonable balance. Now, if as an authority we decide to withdraw that concession completely, which we can do on demand responsive transport, that would bring our subsidy down, regardless of ridership. Now, if we increased the price point for tickets, that would bring the subsidy down, regardless of, and even it out regardless of ridership. But, you know, as a local authority, we have other responsibilities than just the financial ones for the operator. So we think we found the right balance, I think, in the tendering that we're doing. But I do take the point.
Taking the subsidy away and putting the price up, it may bring down the cost of the taxpayer, but it also brings down the public benefit, because then you don't have the people using it. They're all back out in their cars again. Okay, I understand the sensitivities. Thank you for that explanation.
Lauren, you've got your hand up. Would you like to comment?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to come in because you make a good point, John, about, you know, if one person's ordering it and then we're saying we only want to add, the max we ever want to add is like 10% of the journey time, for example, then that only allows for kind of a couple of pickups, which means the vehicle isn't at full capacity. But it won't be like that all the time, because we imagine on some occasions there'll be routes that need DRT that are perhaps outside schools or workplaces. So there might be a few people kind of ordering at the same place at the same time. So the vehicle, especially one that's kind of a school route where there's no commercial service, I would imagine that would fill up almost at the starting point quite early on. And then all you've got is the stops for the drop-offs. So I just wanted to add that in because I think that will balance as well. But I do take your point.
So if nobody else is singing, I've got one further point I'd like to raise, if I could. Now, I've just been looking through the papers again, and I cannot find the page where it has it in. My understanding is that we have the spec, or is Lauren going to go cap in hand to Rob Middleton and ask for some more money?
It's something that I'm in discussion with finance about at the moment. Obviously, we've flagged that we've made certain assumptions and we won't really know the price until the tenders come in. And then that will be a conversation that we have to have. We think there is a little bit of flexibility around that pricing. And I still think it's doable for that pricing, and I think that if it's competitive tender, we should get good prices in. But we do have a little bit of flexibility.
I mean, I would have to say when a tender goes out, we should have a pretty good idea of what the tender price is coming in at, both up and down. If someone comes in extremely cheap, that should set alarm bells ringing as well, because that means that potentially they're not going to be able to fill the contract to the standard we want. If they all come in expensive, then we haven't done our work very well. However, give you a little bit of latitude on this one, in the fact that as not many people have done this before, it wouldn't surprise me. That's why I'm asking the question, because, you know, unlike when we're tendering for some grass mowing, where we should be able to get that to within a few pence in our assumptions, in this, there is some latitude there. So it would be helpful to understand again, if, I mean, you said there's a little bit of latitude. If we fall well outside of that criteria, judging by the fact that this is coming to an end, and we've launched a tender and people have come back in with a price, do we have to re-tender again and go for a lesser spec, or do we have to, or can we change it in the tender that we've got and just say we're reducing this spec and go back to this level? How exactly is it going to work if we haven't got our figures right? Because frankly, although the modelling is really very good, and someone obviously has done some significant work on it, if that doesn't turn out to be correct when people actually look at, we've tonight mentioned some slight gold plating that we would like on this contract. If when all that gold plating adds up and people think, oh, hang on a minute, this is going to cost us a bit more. One of the main aims of pushing this was to reduce costs. If it doesn't reduce costs by as much as you thought, or insignificantly at all, are we still going to go with it?
I think, I mean, it's a conversation to have that I would need to have with finance and the councillor, but it is obviously, we would have to seriously look at what went wrong with the spec and with the modelling, if that was the case. We did, when we went out to do the modelling, we did a number of ranges on it, and first of all I was like, give me your gold standard service. So we got a price for their gold standard service, and then it was with the bus service levels as they are at the moment. If the commercial services were running every 7 minutes, then that would be fine. We'd work out through ticketing and we'd drop them onto a bus. But at the moment, we're not at that point. So we want to give them an end-to-end journey. But there were things like that we looked at to say, well, okay, you know, what is the minimum level of service? How else can we do this if we have to? So I think we've been fairly thorough. I will be very, very surprised if it's miles out. And you know, if it is, then yes, I'm going to have to go back and have some serious conversations with Councillor Townsend and finance about how we handle that and what our options are. And we're going to have to look at that very quickly. So,
thank you very much for that. Just one other question. If the service that we are getting from the provider within the first couple of months, they haven't got enough vehicles on spec, people are missing appointments, they're not being picked up, people are being told, sorry, we can't meet your needs here, and things are getting there, what sanctions do we have to be able to deal with that and improve performance? Obviously, you meet with them, and I would imagine you'll be meeting with them on a regular basis, very regular basis, in the initial stages to understand what's going on. If it's going very wrong, what are our sanctions going to be in this contract, and how are we going to implement them?
We have, under the DPS, we already have a number of KPIs with financial penalties attached, and I'm strengthening those in the invitation to tender documentation.
Thank you. Lauren, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of reiterating what Adele said. I should have put my hand down really, because she said most of what I was going to say. But yeah, in terms of the financial question, I would be surprised if it came in at an alternative amount to the modelling. I do think we're in quite a good position in terms of the competitiveness of those who I think will be coming forward for this contract. Because like I said, we've even just putting out a few press releases saying we were looking into it. We had a lot of interest and a lot of people coming forwards and kind of, you know, making suggestions they would like to be involved, if you will. So I expect it to be quite competitive, which can only work in our favour. And also it's just worth highlighting that the subsidies for the buses as they were not sustainable. The last time that we renewed the contracts, they went up by, I think, 72 and 75%. They were at 2.9 million. If they'd have gone up again next year or the year after, I mean, we're talking amounts, millions in subsidies there that really is, I mean, it's not value for money for the taxpayer for the amount of people who were using the subsidised bus route compared to the amount it was costing. It just wasn't sustainable. So I do believe this will be a better financial solution for the council. The other thing is it covers the whole of MK. You know, if we had a commercial route drop out before, or say, well, this is no longer commercial and we're skipping this route, we had the decision to be like, right, are we going to subsidise and give them the money to continue the route, or are we just going to let that route disappear? We will now have a DRT system that will cover the entirety of MK that should quite easily be able to pick up, should that happen again, should commercial routes should commercial operators get rid of routes, they should be able to pick it up quite efficiently and kind of include it in the package we've already got. So I just wanted to add those points. Thank you.
Thank you. I've seen John with his hand up, and then I'm going to want to go back live because I haven't seen anybody else and draw the meeting to a conclusion. John.
A few points arising from the conversation we just heard. Hopefully there will be a provision in the document that says the council reserves the right to choose none of the above, because clearly it is entirely possible that none of them will be financially acceptable to us. Second, to put on record the fact that the more we put into our KPIs and penalties for unlikely eventualities, the more the sensible bidder, and it's only sensible bidders we want to deal with, will factor that into their pricing and put their prices up to cover the risk. So we have to be very mindful about whether that is actually a wise thing to do, because the greatest likelihood is it'll probably work. And therefore, actually what we want is we probably want the reasonable price for a system that will probably work, although it just kind of might not. And finally, I attended a presentation on public sector procurement recently, at which it was drummed home to me that the customer is only entitled to award the contract that they have described in the documentation. They're not allowed thereafter to vary it. So if we want the right to vary all the detailed parameters like pickup distance, hours of coverage and all the rest of it, then we have to have agreed what the prices are for those changes, or we have to do whatever you need to do to make sure that we have that flexibility built into it for the future. Don't need answers, I'm getting nods. Move us on, Chair, but I did want that on the record.
Thank you very much. Person at the back, could we please go back live again? I'll wait for a signal that we are. Are we live? Okay, so we are back live. Apologies for those who have been waiting, but just to reiterate that discussion that we've just had in the last half an hour will now be monitored, and any figures bleeped out, but the conversation will be made public just in case anybody is wanting to hear it. I was originally going to try and put together a motion here, but someone did suggest to me before the meeting that might be too difficult. They were a very wise person, because I think they foresaw the way that this is going, and this is long. I haven't seen nobody vehemently disagreeing with anything anyone has said yet. Therefore, my suggestion is that I ask Ros to draw the minutes up, or certainly the key points out of the minutes, as soon as possible, like probably before the end of the week, and that the resolution I will put forward is that we would ask the cabinet member and the decision makers, the officers and the cabinet member, to pay heed to the comments that we have made, and to do that. Now, the way I suggest that happens is, because I've just seen 2 hands go up, is that when Ros has put that list together, we will email that out to everybody. If everybody, if we see a number of people vehemently disagree with something that's in there, we'll take it out, and if we think something's been missed off, we'll put it back in. So so I accept that, you know, we could do it. It's not the ideal solution, but there has been so much discussed in the last 2.5 hours that I think to try and capture it all, if I tried to do it in a discussion now, we're either going to be here till midnight or we're going to miss some stuff out. So I've seen Dan and Nigel. Dan, you go first, and then Nigel.
Thanks. I was going to make the point I'm perfectly happy with your proposed approach in terms of, you know, taking stock of the minutes overall. I think there are some areas where it would be helpful perhaps for us to specify where we feel as a committee we'd like an update to come back to us. I was thinking particularly about how residents' input and the communication strategy will be drawn up as one example, but there may be others.
Nigel?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to pick up the 3 points or the 3 recommendations that I thought I made earlier, where I thought there was consensus. The first one is about money and writing to the Secretary of State and asking the Cabinet member to write to the Secretary of State about the money. I think this is such an important point because it strikes me the government should be investing in things that create better services and financial stability longer term. So the money is, I think, a really important one. The second one, which there was a lot of support on, including from Councillor Bint, was about the client function and ensuring we've got an effective client function to oversee the new service. And then the third one was that contract, that specification must be outcome focused, rather than, as you used the term earlier, Chair, output focused. It must be outcome focused. So I think those 3 points need to be picked up in our recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
I have certainly got all of those in my recommendations, so in my list. So I've certainly got those. The only thing that does remind me is Kerry and Mick Legg have not spoken yet. Mick, you're sitting there. Have you got anything you wish to add?
Hi, Chair. Sorry about this. I've had technical issues tonight. That's why I haven't really contributed. But no, I'm happy with everything I've heard.
Thank you very much. Kerry, have you got anything you wish to add?
Hello, Chair. I did have some points earlier, but they were kind of either answered in the presentation as we went along or somebody else raised it. So no, thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. Right, so what we'll do is we'll aim to get a list of those drawn together relatively soon, and we'll try and get those out before the end of the week, when we'll be putting out the recommendations anyway. So if you could just keep an eye out from sort of Thursday onwards in your inboxes, and a quick response would be appreciated to anything that comes up there. At that point, at 9:30, John, yes?
We heard earlier on, and it was news to me, that the officers proposed to go out to tender within, I thought they said, the next week or so. I just wonder, is that actually giving themselves time to take notes of all the things we've raised, which I had rather hoped some of those would be some quite substantive changes to wording on a specification.
I would very much hope they've already done that, and looking at the way they've been looking down and moving, I think both of them have been making frantic notes, and Stuart certainly has here, who will be overseeing this. So I think all of those have been picked up now, but if we can get this decision out relatively quickly, I'm talking by the end of the week, I think that does allow that to be finessed in the report as it comes, in the procurement as it comes through. But you're right, time is of the essence, John, but yes, that is. So anyway, we are now at 9:32, half an hour later. I would just like to end, which I hope we'll all agree, as a vote of thanks to Lauren and Adele and Stuart, who's sat silently here all night, and also to Ros for the work they've done, and our staff at the back who have made this meeting. Thank you very much. Apologies, it's gone on slightly longer than anticipated, but I do believe we've added a bit of value tonight, which is the whole point of scrutiny, is to add a bit of value to what the council is doing. Let's see if tomorrow night's meeting is quite as valuable. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who contributed.
Good night.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.